Salve galera, Drigo do canal Games da Galera. Vamos aqui acompanhar então, a estreia vai começar daqui a pouquinho. Aqui tá dizendo o 18 de março às 16 horas, mas eu acho que às 16 horas deve ser algum horário ou outro, porque tá marcado pro horário de Brasília às 13 horas. Vamos lá, vamos aguardar aqui, vamos ver aí como é que vai ser. Tô aqui do lado da minha filhinha, ela tá vendo um desenho, então qualquer momento aí eu posso sacar minha câmera aqui, porque eu vou ter que cuidar dela, enfim. Mas a transmissão segue, vamos conferir as specs aí e vamos aproveitar então, enquanto não começou ainda, vamos embora pra abertura. E se você não é inscrito no canal, não se esqueça de se inscrever. E também é importante aí, deixe seu like aí para ajudar a divulgação aí do nosso canal. Então vamos lá. Já são 13 horas. E aí? Começou. Vamos lá. Ah, ainda faltam uns minutinhos. Deixa eu só baixar aqui um pouquinho o áudio. Neto Game, primeiro salve. Bernardo Lima, salve também. Já vão deixando seus comentários aí sobre o que vocês estão achando aí. O que vocês acham? Qual é a aposta de vocês? Vai superar ou não o Xbox Series X, as specs? E já vou deixar uns comentários aqui que deixaram que o Davi Age disse que o PlayStation 5 vai rodar 8K. Essa é a aposta dele. E ele acha que é o PlayStation 5. E a Ana Cristina disse que acho que o Series X vai ser o mais potente. Então vamos lá, vamos ver como é que vai ser aí essa parada aí. Um minuto. Vamos lá, vai dar tudo certo, Eu tô com a minha filhinha aqui do lado, gurizada, então não reparem, ó. Quando conheceremos futuros preços? Ju Oliver, salve Ju. Bernardo, seguinte, normalmente o que eu pesquisei no histórico dos outros consoles, tanto o Xbox One X como o Xbox 360, eles primeiro divulgaram as specs, tá? Eles fizeram a divulgação das specs e depois, passando mais ou menos uma semana, isso aconteceu no Series X, eles divulgaram depois a data de lançamento, e aí passou mais ou menos uns 2 meses depois do anúncio, e aí foi na E3. 3 meses depois do anúncio, foi na E3, e aí eles anunciaram o preço na E3. Normalmente eles faziam isso na E3, então tanto do Xbox One como do Xbox Series X, PlayStation 4 e o PlayStation 4 Pro. O PlayStation 4 Pro não, eles fizeram um evento separado, PlayStation Experience, e aí eles anunciaram o preço. Então eu acho que vão dizer nessa semana ainda o preço. Minha aposta vai ser nessa. Eles falaram que eles cancelaram, infelizmente, o GDC, onde eles iam passar informações sobre o PlayStation 5. Então agora eles vão fazer nesse momento aí. Vamos lá.
Lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced the development of the console. I think you all know I'm a big believer in console generations. Once every 5 or 6 or 7 years, a console arrives with substantially new capabilities. There's a lot of learning by the game developers,
consoles foram ganhando grandes capacidades aí à medida que foram avançando suas gerações.
Now, it used to be that as a console designer, you'd somehow intuit what would be the best set of capabilities for the new console, and then build it in complete secrecy. For the PlayStation consoles, that period lasted through PlayStation 3, a powerful and groundbreaking console, but also one that caused quite a lot of heartache, as it was initially difficult to develop games for.
Tiveram disseram que do PlayStation 2 e PlayStation 3 teve um grande avanço tecnológico que dificultou até mesmo para os próprios desenvolvedores proverem jogos para eles, porque foi quase que exponencial aí o crescimento, né? Então eles começaram a ouvir os desenvolvedores e até mesmo para terem inspirações e até como é que eles facilitam que os desenvolvedores consigam prover jogos para os consoles novos, utilizando a capacidade do console.
Anything we can do to make life easier for the game creators or help them realize their dreams, we will do.
Então,
So,
nós realizamos
about
os
once
seus,
every
os
2
os seus
years,
sonhos.
I take a tour
Eles
of the
estão ali,
industry.
pessoal,
I
numa
go to the
plateia
various
de
developers
desenvolvedores.
and
Então, eles
publishers,
falaram assim, nós
sit
vamos
down
realizar o
and
sonho de
discuss how
vocês,
they're
vamos
doing with the
facilitar
current
cada vez
consoles
mais
and
ainda o
what they'd like
desenvolvimento
to
de
see
jogos.
in future
A Sony
consoles.
sempre foi muito boa
This
nisso,
requires
isso não dá pra
weeks on the
negar, né?
road, as reaching the bulk of the game creators involves talking to well over 100 people at something like 24 publishers and developers. And it is incredibly valuable. By the way,
Tá dando
the
uma valorizada aí
feature
nos
most
desenvolvedores,
requested by the
dizendo assim,
developers,
temos
that
centenas,
was an
milhares
SSD,
de desenvolvedores,
which
então
we were
nós
very
realmente
happy to
queremos
put in
dar
the hardware,
valor
but a lot of problem solving was
a quem
required.
manda
I'll
nos
be
jogos,
doing
a quem cria os
deep
jogos, né?
dive on the SSD and surrounding systems later on
Boa.
in this talk.
Sistemas de
It's also
surround,
key to
deep
make a
dive,
generational leap while keeping the
Deep
console
dive.
sufficiently familiar to game developers. I think
as
about this in
tecnologias aí
terms
que
of balancing
provavelmente eles vieram
evolution
trabalhando
and
durante todos
revolution.
esses anos aí.
Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target was a revolution each time with a brand new feature set. That was great in many ways, but time for the developers to get up and running got longer with each console. In the past, I've called this time to triangle. Here's what I had for those 3 consoles. To be clear, I'm not talking about time to make a game. Developers will be ambitious,
Interessante, né?
and
Eles
it
estão
may
fazendo uma
take them
comparação
6
de mais ou
years or
menos
so
quanto
to
tempo
realize
levava
their
para
vision.
desenvolver um jogo
What
em
I'm
média.
talking about
Então
is
realmente
that
foi ficando
dead
cada
time
vez mais
before
difícil.
graphics and
Avançava a
other
tecnologia,
aspects of
PlayStation
game
1
development
levava
were
1 a
up
2
and
meses,
running,
PlayStation 2,
and
3 a 6
trying to
meses,
minimize
PlayStation
it.
3, 6 a 2 meses. Então
On
como é
the
que eles
other hand,
fazem
if we're trying to
para
reduce
otimizar
that dead
isso,
time to zero,
né?
that
Com
means
o
the
novo
hardware
PlayStation?
architecture can't change at all. We're handcuffed. We need to judge for each feature what value it adds and whether it's worth the increase in developer time needed to support it. So with PlayStation 4, we were able to strike a pretty good balance between performance and familiarity. We got required learning back to PlayStation 1 levels. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new
Eles
features
conseguiram
and
reduzir
keeping
bastante aí
familiar
o
programming
tempo
model.
do trabalho dos
Ultimately, I think we
desenvolvedores
ended
de
up
1 a
with
2
something
meses
under a month of getting
para
up to
fazer jogo.
speed.
Então,
That
olha
feels
só,
like we're
um
striking
mês.
about the right
Claro, né,
balance.
gurizada, tem
I'll
toda
go
a
into a bit
produção
more
do
detail
jogo,
later
né?
today about
Toda
our
a produção do
philosophy
jogo,
with the GPU
história,
and the specific
roteiro,
feature
enfim,
set that
design,
resulted
enfim.
from it.
Você tá falando de desenvolvimento de jogo
It's
mesmo,
also very
puramente
important
simples.
for us as the hardware team to
Encontrando
find
novos sonhos,
new
né?
dreams, by which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance, and the amount of RAM. The increase in graphics performance over the past 2 decades has been astonishing, but there are other areas in which we can innovate and provide significant value to the game creators, and through them, the players. That's why the SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore, regardless of what came out of the conversations with game developers and publishers.
Fica muito mais fácil quando você trabalha com um disco SSD aí, né? Exatamente para tanto desenvolver jogos, ou seja, para otimizar jogos. E grande dificuldade, né, gurizada, é os caras não conseguirem colocar o sonho deles dentro do jogo, né? Dentro do jogo por causa de capacidade técnica, de problema de arquitetura. Então, essa é a ideia que eles querem resolver, né? Escutar os desenvolvedores, balancearam a evolução e a revolução para encontrar novos sonhos. Encontrando novos sonhos. O SSD é a chave dessa próxima geração. HD.
As in, we know it's probably impossible, but can you put an SSD in it? That was a discussion we were also having internally. It was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible. At the same time, though, in 2015 and 2016, when we were having these conversations, developers were already banging
a dificuldade que tinha de trabalhar com discos Blu-ray para você fazer com que os sonhos fossem encontrados, ou seja, fosse ter o desempenho que os desenvolvedores queriam com o disco Blu-ray. Por isso que o SSD é a chave disso agora.
The difficulty being that hard drives are neither particularly fast nor flexible.
E o hard disk drive, tradicional HD, tanto do PlayStation 4 como do Xbox One, hard disks que também tem um problema de leitura e gravação de dados. E agora com SSD, isso aí realmente vai melhorar muito, né?
We support zlib decompression on PlayStation 4 that gets you something like 50% more data on the disk and 50% higher effective read speed.
50% mais rápido ainda de efetividade em relação à leitura
as well
dos
as
novos
sourced
discos.
from multiple locations within those files. So lots of seeks are needed at 2 to 50-ish milliseconds each. My rule of thumb is that the hard drive is spending 2/3 of its time seeking and only 1/3 of its time actually loading data. Putting all of that together, a gigabyte is very roughly 20 seconds to load from a hard drive.
Esse é o ponto.
Now,
O
a
load
gigabyte is
de um
not
disco,
much
de um
data.
hard
Games are
drive
using
com
5 or
SSD é
6
muito mais
gigabytes of
rápido.
RAM
A
on
gente vê pelo
PlayStation
próprio
4,
Windows
so
10, quem
boot
tem
times
um
and load
SSD
times
e
can get
carrega o
pretty
Windows
crazy.
10, o Windows 10
Or to
carrega em
put that
3, 4
differently,
segundos, é muito
as a
rápido.
player, you wait for the game to boot, wait for the game to load, wait for the level to reload every time you die,
Eles
and
não
you
querem
wait for what is
que você
euphemistically
fique
called
esperando para
fast
jogar. É o
travel.
mesmo lema do Xbox, da
All of that
Microsoft.
leads
Você
to the
tem que
dream.
jogar, mais jogar
What
e
if we could
menos
have not
espera.
just an SSD, but a
Ó.
blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a
5
second
gigabytes por
what would
segundo,
change?
no
Now,
mínimo.
SSDs are completely different from hard drives. They don't have seeks as such. If you have a 5 gigabyte a second SSD, you can read data from 1,000 different locations in that second, pretty much at speed. As for time to load a gigabyte, this is next gen we're talking about, so memory is bigger. Instead, we should be asking how long to load 2 gigabytes. And the answer is about
Galera,
a quarter of a second. That's amazing. We're talking
já
2
tem uma
orders of
vantagem
magnitude, meaning
do
very
Xbox
roughly
Series X em relação ao
100
PlayStation 5.
times faster.
A bandwidth
Which
dele é
means
5
at 5
GB por
gigabytes a
segundo,
second
o do
for the
Xbox Series
SSD,
X
the
é 6
potential is that
GB.
the game boots in a second. There are no load screens. The game just fades down while loading a half dozen gigabytes and fades back up again. Same
Vamos
for a
aguardar,
reload.
vamos
You're
aguardar.
immediately back in the action after you die. And fast travel becomes so fast it's blink and you miss it. As game creators, we
Querem
go from
que
trying to distract
as
the player
informações
from
elas
how long
viajem dentro
fast
do console
travel
num
is
piscar
taking,
de olhos.
like those Spider-Man subway rides, to being so blindingly fast that we might even have to slow that transition down. Pretty cool, right? But for me, this is not the primary reason to change from a hard drive to an SSD. The primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD
não
is
é a
that it
razão
gives the
primária
game designer
mudar isso.
freedom. Or to
Mas
put that
não é
differently, with a
apenas
hard
mudar do
drive,
disco para o
the
hard
20
drive.
seconds that it takes to load a
Isso
gigabyte
tem um
can
sinal,
sabotage the game that the developer is
ó,
trying to create.
porque eles não querem que
I
isso
think
fique
almost all of us
preso
in the room have
no
experienced
disco e
this, maybe
sabotem
in
o
different
sonho do
ways. Say
desenvolvedor
we're
por
making
causa
an
de
adventure
falta de
game and we have
capacidade
two
de
rich
leitura, velocidade de
environments where we
leitura.
each want enough textures and
Olha,
models
gurizada,
to fill
esse
them
cara
out.
tá dando muita
Which you
ênfase
can
na
do as
questão do
long as you have a
SSD,
long
o que
staircase
pode
or elevator ride or a windy
indicar que o
corridor
PlayStation
where you
5
can
talvez nem
ditch the
tenha
old
discos.
assets and then take
Talvez
30
vá para a
seconds
linha
or so to load the new asset.
de jogos somente digitais,
Having a
mas
30-second
eu acho que é muito
elevator
cedo ainda
ride
para
is a
especular, até
little
porque
extreme. More realistically,
eu
you'd
não ia ficar
probably
nada
chop
feliz
the
com isso.
world
Eu gosto
into
muito
a
de ter o
number of
jogo
smaller pieces and
de
then
ter o
do some
jogo físico.
calculations with sight lines and run speeds like we did for Haven City when we were making Jak 2. The game is 20 years old, but not much has changed since then. All those twisty passages are there for a reason. There's a whole subset of level design dedicated to this sort of work, but still, it's a giant distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. So when I talked about the dream of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 gigabyte a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second? If you figure that it takes half a second to turn, that's 4 gigabytes of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right for next gen. Anyway, back to the hard drive. Another strategy for increasing effective read speed is to make big sequential chunks of data. For example, we might group all the data together for each city block. That removes most of the seeks, and the streaming gets faster. But there's a downside too, which is that frequently used data is included in many chunks and therefore is on the hard drive many, many times. Marvel's Spider-Man uses this strategy, and though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication as a result. Some of the objects like mailboxes or news racks are on the hard drive 400 times. What I'm describing here are things that cramp a creative director's style. Either level design gets a little bit boring in places,
Interessante que ele está comparando isso com a arquitetura do jogo Spider-Man, que funciona muito bem mesmo com o HDD, o Hard Disk Drive. Então eles podem ter uma estratégia melhor de arquitetura para poder fazer com que os jogos tenham um carregamento imperceptível.
That's because when just part of a file has been changed, the new data can be downloaded pretty quickly. But before the game boots up, a brand new file has to be constructed that includes the changed portion. Otherwise, every change would add a seek or two. Even so, you can occasionally see this happening on game titles. They start to hitch once they get patched enough. With an SSD, though, no seeks. So, no need to make brand new files with the changes incorporated.
Interessante. Toda vez que você faz uma instalação de um jogo, normalmente o disco é desse tamanho e no console fica enorme. E com o SSD ele disse que não, você simplesmente vai ter, não vai precisar criar novos arquivos. Isso vai melhorar muito o desempenho do console.
By the time you realize you need a piece of data, it's much too late to go out and load it. So system memory has to contain all of the data that could be used in the next 30 seconds or so of gameplay. That means a lot of the 8 gigabytes of system memory is idle. It's just waiting there to be potentially used. On PlayStation 5, though, the SSD is very close to being like more RAM.
16 GB DDR6. Então a gente já vai preenchendo aqui com as especificações.
There's no need to have lots of data parked in system memory waiting to potentially be used. A different way of saying that is that most of RAM is working on the game's behalf. This is one of the reasons that 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 feels right for PlayStation 5.
Mesma quantidade de gigabytes do Xbox Series X. E a mesma frequência também, DDR6.
So, back to the dream of the SSD. Here's the set of targets. Boot the game in a second. No load screens. Design freedom, meaning no twisty passages or long
Ultra Fast Boot, ou seja, sobe muito rápido, sem telas de carregamento. Ultra High Speed para transmissão. E Duplicate de Game Data, ou seja...
The reality, though, is that the SSD is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of places where bottlenecks can occur in between the SSD and the game code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an SSD with 10 times the speed of a standard hard drive, I probably see only double the loading speed, if that. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100 times faster. So every single potential bottleneck needed to be addressed. And there are a lot.
Ele trabalha de uma forma muito mais rápida, sem uma grande descompressão.
Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process. Data is loaded into system memory from the hard drive or SSD. It's examined. A few values are tweaked to check it in, and then it's moved to its final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Vai trabalhar no próprio arquivo, interessante isso, né? O que vai melhorar muito mais a capacidade gráfica dos jogos, porque gráfico é informação na tela. Gigabytes na tela.
Namely, a custom flash controller and a number of custom units in our main chip.
Customização de controle.
Designed for smooth and bottleneck-free operation, but also with games in mind. For example, there are 6 levels of priority when reading from the SSD. Priority is very important. You can imagine the player heading into some new location in the world and the game requesting a few gigabytes of textures. And while those textures are being loaded, an enemy is shot and has to speak a few dying words. Having multiple priority levels lets the audio for those dying words get loaded immediately. On one side, that flash controller connects to the actual flash dies that supply the storage. To reach our bandwidth target of 5 gigabytes a second, we ended up with a 12-channel interface. 8 channels wouldn't be enough. The resulting bandwidth we've achieved is actually 5.5 gigabytes a second. With a 12-channel interface, the most natural size that emerges for an SSD is 825 gigabytes. The key question for us was, is that enough? I mean, it's tempting to add more, but Flash certainly doesn't come cheap, and we have a responsibility to our gaming audience to be cost-effective with regards to what we put in the console. Ultimately, we resolved this question by looking at the play patterns of a broad range of gamers. We examined the specific games that they were playing over the course of a weekend or a week or a month, and whether that set of games would fit properly on the SSD. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or redownloads would be quite low, and so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. I'll go through the details in a moment. Back to the flash controller. On the other side, it connects to our main custom chip via 4 lanes of Gen 4 PCIe. And inside the main custom chip is a pretty hefty unit dedicated to I/O. Before we talk about what that does, let's talk compression for a moment. PlayStation 4 used zlib as its compression format. We decided to use it again on PlayStation 5, but on my 2017 tour of developers, I learned about a new format called Kraken from Rad Game Tools. It's like zlib's smarter cousin. Simple, similar types of algorithms, but about 10% better compression, which is pretty big. That means 10% more game on the UHD Blu-ray disc or on the SSD. Kraken had only been out for a year, but it was already becoming a de facto industry standard. Half of the teams I talked to were either using it or getting ready to evaluate it. So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit.
As informações elas são extremamente técnicas, gurizada, porque o público dessa palestra são desenvolvedores, então o cara está explicando exatamente no detalhe para poder vender a questão de que vai ser muito mais fácil desenvolver jogos aqui, porque a arquitetura vai permitir aí vocês criem os seus sonhos.
By the way, in terms of performance, that custom decompressor equates to 9 of our Zen 2 cores. That's what it would take to decompress the Kraken stream with a conventional CPU. There's a lot more in the custom I/O unit, including a dedicated DMA controller. The game can direct exactly where it wants to send the data coming off of the SSD. This equates to another Zen 2 core or two in terms of its copy performance. Its primary purpose is to remove check-in as a bottleneck. There's 2 dedicated I/O coprocessors and a large RAM pool. These aren't Zen 2 cores. They're there principally to direct the variety of custom hardware around them. One of the coprocessors is dedicated to SSD I/O. This lets us bypass traditional file I/O and its bottlenecks when reading from the SSD. The other is responsible for memory mapping, which I know doesn't sound like anything related to the SSD, but a lot of developers map and remap memory as part of file I/O, and this too can become a bottleneck. There are coherency engines to assist the coprocessors. Coherency comes up a lot in places. Probably the biggest coherency issue is stale data in the GPU caches. Flushing all of the GPU caches whenever the SSD is read is an unattractive option. It could really hurt the GPU performance. So we've implemented a gentler way of doing things, where the coherency engines inform the GPU of the overwritten address ranges, and custom scrubbers in several dozen GPU caches do pinpoint evictions of just those address.
Ele vai ter processador dedicado a I/O, entrada, leitura e gravação, de dados.
You just indicate what data you'd like to read from your original uncompressed file and where you'd like to put it. And the whole process of loading it happens invisibly to you and at very high speed. Back to the dream. Thanks to all of that surrounding hardware, our 5.5 gigabytes a second really should translate into something like 100 times faster I/O than PS4 and allow the dream of no load screens and super fast streaming to become a reality. Having said that, expandability of our SSD is going to be quite important. Flash is costly, and you may very well want to add storage to whatever we put in the console. Now, the kind of storage you need depends on how you're going to use it. If you have an extensive PlayStation 4 library and you'd like to take advantage of backwards compatibility to play those games on PlayStation 5, then a large
vai na mesma linha do Xbox Series X, ou seja, o HD interno para rodar jogos próprios para o PlayStation 5. O HD externo vai rodar jogos PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, enfim, retrocompatibilidade, os jogos retrocompatíveis. Porque ele tem uma velocidade que comporta a arquitetura dos jogos anteriores. Tá? Então vai ser a mesma linha do Xbox Series X.
These are internal drives that you can get on the open market and install in a bay in the PlayStation 5. As for which ones we support and when, I'll get to that in a moment. They connect through the custom I/O unit just like our SSD does, so they can take full advantage of the decompression, I/O coprocessors, and all the other features I was talking about. Here's the catch, though. That commercial drive has to be at least as fast as ours. Games that rely on the speed of our SSD need to work flawlessly with any M2 drive. When I gave the Wired interview last year, I said that the PlayStation 5 SSD was faster than anything available on PC. At the time, commercial M2 drives used PCIe 3.0, and 4 lanes of that cap out at 3.5 gigabytes a second. In other words, no PCIe 3.0 drive can hit the required spec. M2 drives with PCIe 4.0 are now out in the market. We're getting in samples and seeing 4 or 5 gigabytes a second from them. By year's end, I expect there will be drives that saturate 4.0 and support 7 gigabytes a second. Having said that, we are comparing apples and oranges, though, because that commercial M2 drive will have its own architecture, its own flash
Não tem como
controller, and
comparar
so
um
on.
disco do
For
PlayStation
example,
5 com um
the
disco
NVMe
de PC.
specification
É a
lays
mesma coisa
out
se
a
você
priority
comparar
scheme for the
maçãs
best
e
that M2
laranjas.
drives
Não tem
can
como,
use.
são
And
arquiteturas
that scheme
diferentes.
is pretty nice, but it only has 2 true priority levels. Our drive supports 6. We can hook up a drive with only 2 priority levels, definitely, but our custom I/O unit has to arbitrate the extra priorities rather than the M2 drive's flash controller. And so the M2 drive needs a little extra speed to take care of issues arising from the different approach. That commercial drive also needs to physically fit inside of the bay we created in PlayStation 5 for M2 drives. Unlike internal hard drives, there's unfortunately no standard for the height of an M2 drive. And some M2 drives have giant heat sinks. In fact, some of them even have their own fans. Right now, we're getting M2 drive samples and benchmarking them in various ways. When games hit beta as they get ready for the PlayStation 5 launch at year end, we'll also be doing some compatibility testing to make sure that the architecture of particular M2 drives isn't too foreign for the games to handle. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit and which drive samples have benchmarked appropriately high in our testing. It would be great if that happened by launch, but it's likely to be a bit past it. So please
Eles tiveram um resultado muito bom em relação à questão de compatibilidade aí com jogos nesses discos externos aí. Então, beleza.
This was definitely a recurring theme with
Agora,
the GPU.
agora a GPU.
We need new GPU
Evolução
features and
e evolução.
capabilities. If we only have
GPU,
more
que é o
performance, it's
processamento
not really a
gráfico,
new
vamos lá.
generation of console. Of course, many of these
GPU
capabilities result in
do
more performance.
Xbox
That's
Series X
part of
é
why a PlayStation
12
5
teraflops,
teraflop is more powerful than a
1.825
PlayStation 4
GHz,
teraflop. But we
AMD
aren't just looking for the
RDNA 2.
performance. We also need the
Vamos ver.
ability to do something with the GPU
As novas
that
features
could
aqui.
not have been done before. And we need higher performance per watt.
Diz que
Every time we
nunca
double
novas
the
features,
performance of some GPU component,
alta
we don't
eficiência
want
nunca
to find
vista
out we've
antes.
doubled the power consumed
Deu uma
and the
cutucadinha
heat
aí.
produced. But at the same time, we have to make sure the GPU can run PS4 games.
Mas ao mesmo tempo a gente também tem que garantir que essa GPU também rode os jogos do PlayStation 4. Com retrocompatibilidade. Importante, gurizada, a retrocompatibilidade ali que ele comentou só PlayStation 4, ele não comentou outros consoles por enquanto.
The GPU supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game. The GPU supports primitive shaders, but you can release your first game on PlayStation 5 without making any use of them. Before I get into the capabilities of the GPU,
não vai poder botar o
I'd
Ray
like to make
Tracing
clear
nos
2
jogos
points that
anteriores,
can be
mas
quite
jogos para o
confusing.
PlayStation 5 vão poder rodar o Ray
First, we
Tracing
have a custom
tranquilamente.
AMD GPU based on their
Olha!
RDNA 2 technology. What does that mean?
Mesma
AMD is
coisa.
continuously improving and revising
Acho que eles
their
andaram
tech.
se conversando.
For RDNA 2, their goals
É a mesma
were,
GPU
roughly
do
speaking,
Xbox One,
to reduce
o Xbox
power
One
consumption
Series
by
X, o Xbox Series
re-architecting
X.
the GPU to put data close to where it's needed, to optimize the GPU for performance, and to add a new, more advanced
Vamos ver
feature set.
quantos teraflops.
But that feature set is malleable, which is to say that we have our own needs for PlayStation, and that can factor into what the AMD roadmap becomes. So collaboration is born. If we bring concepts to AMD that are felt to be widely useful, then they can be adopted into RDNA 2 and used broadly, including in PC GPUs. If the ideas are sufficiently specific to what we're trying to accomplish, like the GPU cache scrubbers I was talking about, then they end up
GPU
being
cache.
just
Vamos ver
for
como é
us.
que vai ser.
If you see a similar discrete GPU available as a PC card at roughly the same time as we release our console, that means our collaboration with AMD succeeded in producing technology useful in both worlds. It doesn't mean that we as Sony simply incorporated the PC part into our console. This continuous improvement in AMD technology means it's dangerous to rely on teraflops as an absolute indicator of performance, and CU count should be avoided as well. In the case of CPUs, we all understand this. The PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 each have 8 CPUs, but we never think that meant the capabilities and performance are equal. It's the same for CUs. For one thing, they've been getting much larger over time. Adding new features means adding lots of transistors. In fact, the transistor count for a PlayStation 5 CU is 62% larger than the transistor count for a PlayStation 4 CU. Second, the PlayStation 5 GPU is backwards compatible with PlayStation 4. What does that mean? One way you can achieve backwards compatibility is to put the previous console's chipset in the new console, like we did with some PlayStation 3s. But that's, of course, extremely expensive. A better way is to
Falou que para ter
incorporate
uma,
any differences
uma
in the previous
retrocompatibilidade
console's
efetiva,
logic
teria que botar os
into the new
chipsets dos
console's
consoles
custom chips,
anteriores no console
meaning that
atual, o
even
que
as the
tornaria
technology
muito
evolves,
caro.
the logic and feature set that PlayStation
Ó,
4 and PlayStation 4 Pro
PlayStation
titles rely
5
on
Native
is
Mode.
still available in backwards compatibility modes.
Ó,
One advantage of this strategy is that once backwards compatibility is in the console, it's in. It's not as if a cost down will remove backwards compatibility like it did on PlayStation 3. Achieving this unification of functionality took
PlayStation
years of
4
efforts by
garantida aí a
AMD, as any
retrocompatibilidade.
roadmap
Os
advancement
demais,
creates a
pelo visto,
potential
não.
divergence in logic. Running PS4 and PS4 titles at boosted frequencies has also added complexity. The boost is truly massive this time around, and some game code just can't handle it. Testing has to be done on a title-by-title basis. Results are excellent, though. We recently took a look at the top 100 PlayStation 4 titles as ranked by playtime, and we're expecting almost all of them to be playable at launch on PlayStation 5. With regards to new features, as I said, our strategy was to try to break new ground, but at the same time not to require use of the new GPU capabilities. For more than a decade, GPUs have imposed a restriction on game engines. Software handles vertex processing, but for the most part, dedicated hardware is responsible for the triangles and other geometry that the vertices form. That means it's not possible to do even basic optimizations, such as aborting processing of a vertex if all geometry that uses it is off-screen. PlayStation 5 has a new unit called the Geometry Engine, which brings handling of triangles and other primitives under full programmatic control. As a game developer, you're free to ignore its existence and use the PlayStation 5 GPU as if it were no more capable than the PS4 GPU, or you can use this new intelligence in various ways. Simple usage could be performance optimization, such as removing backfaced or off-screen vertices and triangles. More complex usage involves something called primitive shaders, which allow the game to synthesize geometry on
Aqui ele
the
está
fly
falando um pouco
as
de
it's
como é
being
que vai
rendered.
funcionar a
It's a
geometria para
brand new
trabalhar os
capability.
jogos.
Using
E os
primitive
desenvolvedores
shaders
vão
on
poder
PlayStation
optar
5
pela
will
geometria
allow
que
for
existia
a
no
broad
PlayStation
variety of
4
techniques,
ou essa nova
including
feature que o
smoothly
PlayStation
varying
5
level of
oferece.
detail,
Então,
addition of procedural detail to close-up objects, and improvements to particle effects and other visual special effects. Another major new feature of our custom RDNA
sobre ray
2-based
tracing.
GPU is ray tracing, using the same strategy as AMD's upcoming PC GPUs. The CUs contain a new specialized unit called the intersection engine, which can calculate the intersection of rays with boxes and triangles. To use the intersection engine, first you build what is called an acceleration structure. It's data in RAM that contains all of your geometry. There's a specific set of formats you can use. They're variations on the same BVH concept. Then, in your shader program, you
BVH
use a new instruction that asks the intersection engine to check a ray against the BVH. While the intersection engine is processing the requested ray triangle or ray box intersections, the shaders are free to do other work. Having said that, the ray tracing instruction is pretty memory intensive, so it's a good mix with logic-heavy code. There's of course no need to use ray tracing. PS4 graphics engines will run just fine on PlayStation 5, but it presents an opportunity for those interested. I'm thinking it'll take less than 1 million rays a second to have a big impact on audio. That should be enough for audio occlusion and some reverb calculations. With a bit more of the GPU invested in ray tracing, it should be possible to do some very nice global illumination. Having said that, Adding ray-traced shadows and reflections to a traditional graphics engine could easily take hundreds of millions of rays a second, and full ray tracing
Então
could take
ele vai usar todas as
How far
features
can
que
we
o Ray
go?
Tracing
I'm starting
oferece.
to get quite
Então,
bullish. I've already
iluminação
seen a
global,
PlayStation 5 title
sombras,
that's successfully
reflexos,
using
áudio.
ray-tracing-based reflections
Então,
in
realmente, o
complex
PlayStation 5 está
animated
confirmando
scenes
que vai
with
trabalhar
only
com Ray
modest
Tracing,
costs. Another
full
set of
Ray
issues for the
Tracing.
GPU involved size and frequency. How
A
big
GPU
do we
dele
make
vai
the
ter essa
GPU,
capacidade
and
para
what
poder rodar.
frequency do we run it at? This is a balancing act. The chip has a cost, and there's a cost for whatever we use to supply that chip with power and to cool it. In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why. Here's two possible configurations for a GPU roughly of the level of the PlayStation 4 Pro. This is a thought experiment. Don't take these configurations too seriously. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different because teraflops is defined as the computational capability of the vector ALU. That's just one part of the GPU. There are a lot of other units. And those other units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on. About the only downside is that system memory is 33%
Bem, ele está
further
explicando
away
as
in terms
diferenças flops,
But the
que
large
ele faz
number
parte
of
de
benefits more than
33% aí do
counterbalance that.
processador,
As a friend of mine
enfim.
says, a
Agora vamos ver o
rising
que ele vai
tide
dizer em
lifts
relação à
all
quantidade de
boats.
teraflops aí da GPU.
Also, it's easier to fully use 36 CUs in parallel than it is to fully use 48 CUs. When triangles are small, it's much harder to fill all those CUs with useful work. So there's a lot to be said for faster, assuming you can handle the resulting power and heat issues, which frankly, we haven't always done the best job at. Part of the reason for that is, historically, our process for setting CPU and GPU frequencies has relied on some heavy-duty guesswork with regards to how much electrical power games will consume and how much heat will be produced as a result inside of the console.
O consumo dele
Power
também
consumption
é uma
varies a
preocupação
lot
para a
from game to
Sony,
game.
porque
When I
quando os
played
jogos vão
God
ficar,
of War on my
os games vão
PS4 Pro,
avançando cada
I
vez
know the
mais,
power
o
consumption is
consumo
high
dele
just by the
aumenta,
fan noise.
inclusive a temperatura,
But
né?
power isn't simply about engine quality. It's about the minutia of what's being displayed and how. It's counterintuitive, but processing dense geometry typically consumes less power than processing simple geometry, which is, I suspect, why Horizon's map screen, with its low triangle count, makes my PS4 Pro heat up so much. Our process on previous consoles has been to try to guess what the maximum power consumption during the entire console lifetime might be, which is to say, the worst case scene in the worst case game, and prepare a cooling solution that we think will be quiet at that power level. If we get it right, fan noise is minimal. If we get it wrong, the console will be quite loud for the higher power games, and there's even a chance that it might overheat and shut down if we misestimate power too badly. PlayStation 5 is especially challenging because the CPU supports 256-bit native instructions that consume a lot of power. These are great here and there, but presumably only minimally used. Or are they? If we plan for major 256-bit instruction usage, we need to set the CPU clock substantially lower or noticeably increase the size of the power supply and fan. So, after much discussion, we decided to
Eles
go
tiveram
with
que
a very
decidir aí
different
se
direction
eles iam
on the
consumir
PlayStation
mais
5.
parte da questão da
We built
fonte
a GPU
ou
with
se eles vão
36
trabalhar isso
CUs.
tudo
Mind you,
internamente
RDNA2
no
CUs
console
are
lá
large.
na própria
Each has
GPU.
62% more transistors than the CUs
Também
we
tem
were
uma
using on
preocupação
PlayStation
toda de
4.
como vai
if we
consumir
compare
essa energia.
transistor counts, 36 RDNA2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable GPU. Then we went with a variable frequency strategy for PlayStation 5, which is to say we continuously run the GPU and CPU in boost mode. We supply a
Utilizar
generous
tanto
amount
o
of electrical
CPU
power
no
and then
boost mode
increase the
como o GPU
frequency
em
of
boost
GPU
mode,
and
ou seja,
CPU until they reach the
quase
capabilities of the
overclock.
system's
Nós
cooling
vamos
sleeve came up with. So how fast can we run the GPU and CPU with this strategy? The simplest approach would be to look at the actual temperature of the silicon die and throttle the frequency on that basis. But that won't work. It fails to create a consistent PlayStation 5 experience. It wouldn't do to run a console slower simply because it was in a hot room. So rather than look at the actual temperature of the silicon die, we look at the activities that the GPU and CPU are performing and set the frequencies on that basis, which makes everything deterministic and repeatable. While we're at it, we also use AMD's Smart Shift technology and send any unused power from the CPU to the GPU so it can squeeze out a few more pixels. The benefits of this strategy are quite large. Running a GPU at 2 gigahertz was looking like an unreachable target with the old fixed frequency strategy. With this new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can
GPU
guarantee that the
frequência
on-chip logic operates
a
properly.
2.23 GHz.
36 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops, and we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at or close to that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was causing headaches with the old strategy. But now we can run it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency.
Pois é. Aí
That
tem
doesn't
uma
mean all
questão
games will be
de
running at 2.23 gigahertz and 3.5
Botar pra
gigahertz.
cá.
When that worst-case game arrives, it will
3.35
run at a
gigahertz.
lower clock speed, but not too much lower. To reduce power by 10%, it only takes a couple of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor. All things considered, the change to a variable frequency
Bem,
approach will show
aqui é um grande
significant gains
ponto que
for
vai causar
PlayStation
muita
gamers.
polêmica aí,
The
pelo que deu
final
para
of our three
entender.
principles
Porque é o
was
seguinte,
about
eles têm
finding
menos
new
teraflops.
dreams. It's important
Parece
for
que tem
us on the
10
hardware
teraflops.
team to find new ways
E aí
to
ele
expand
trabalha
or
entre
deepen gaming, and
2.23
that's what led us
GHz
to
e
a focus on 3D
3.35
audio.
GHz devido a essa tecnologia
As players,
flash
we
aí entre
experience the
trabalhar com
game through the
GPU
visual,
e
through
CPU
audio, and through the
juntas.
feedback we receive from the controller,
Vamos ver.
such as rumble or haptics. Personally, I feel a game
O
is
Xbox
just
Series
dead
X
without
consegue
audio.
trabalhar com
Visuals
12
are, of course,
teraflops
important, but
a
the impact of audio is
1.825
huge as well.
GHz.
At the same time, the audio team on a game project has to do a lot with a little. For example, on PlayStation 4, there's fierce competition for the Jaguar CPU cores. Audio typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you
A Ana
consider
Cristina
that the
disse que vai lançar
visuals
junto
run
com
at
esse
30 or
novo
60
vírus
frames
aí.
a second, but audio processing needs to happen at almost
Salve, Ana
200
Cristina.
times a second. So, it's been
O
tough
Artist
going making
Crow
forward
perguntou se era
progress
uma
on
espécie de
audio with
react. Não,
PlayStation
cara, tô
4,
tentando entender e
particularly when
traduzir aqui,
PlayStation
porque é
3
muita
was such a
informação
beast when
técnica.
it came to audio.
Como é uma palestra para
The
desenvolvedores,
SPUs
então isso é
themselves
super
were
difícil
almost
de
a
você
perfect device for audio rendering.
pegar
Simple
toda a
pipeline
ideia e
algorithms
toda
that really take
a
advantage
explicação
of
que o cara tá
asynchronous
dando.
DMA
Então,
and frequently
vamos
reach
lá, estamos tentando, estamos
100%
acompanhando aí
utilization
como é
of
que...
the floating point
Porque isso
unit.
está sendo ao vivo,
There's
né? Então,
unfortunately nothing comparable on PlayStation 4. Probably the most dramatic
o
progress in the
Alessandro
PlayStation 4
Clash
generation
perguntou se
has
você
been
acha que
with
vale a pena
virtual
comprar um
reality.
PlayStation 4
The
ainda.
PSVR hardware has its own audio unit. It supports
Vamos
about
aguardar um
50
pouquinho para
pretty
saber como é
decent
que tá o
3D
preço.
sound
Acho que
sources.
tudo é questão de
And this
preço e o
provided
que
a
você quer
hint as to
investir.
where we could go with audio, as well as some valuable experience.
Ok, PlayStation
Not to
VR
oversimplify, but here were our goals
vai
for
continuar
audio
fazendo
on
parte aí do
PlayStation 5.
PlayStation 5, ok.
The first goal was great audio for everyone, not just VR users or soundbar owners or headphone users. That meant audio had to be part of the console. It couldn't be a peripheral. The second goal was to support hundreds of sound sources. We didn't want developers to have to pick and choose what sounds would get 3D effects and which wouldn't. We wanted every sound in the game to have dimensionality. And finally, we wanted to really take on the challenges of presence and locality. Now, when we say presence, we mean the feeling that you're actually there. You've entered the matrix. It's not, of course, something we thought we could perfectly achieve, but the idea was that if we stopped using just a rain sound and instead used lots of 3D audio sources for raindrops hitting the ground at all sorts of locations around you, then at some point your brain would take a leap and you'd begin to have this feeling of real presence inside the virtual world of the game. This has the capacity to affect your appreciation of the game, just like music in a game does. The concept of locality is simpler. It's just your sense of where the audio is coming from.
É, a questão do áudio, ele está dizendo que você tem que ter presença e localidade, onde você vai cada vez mais se sentir dentro do game, né? Vamos ver como é que vai ser o nome dessa tecnologia deles aí.
To use Dead Space
O
as an
Xbox tem o
example,
Double
I know,
Atmos,
old school. You're
que é
fighting
sensacional.
enemies
Olha aí
in
o
fairly
Dead
dark,
Space.
spooky locations. Back in the day, if you played the game using the TV speakers, you could tell that there was one last enemy growling and hunting you down, but it was difficult to tell quite where that enemy was. With headphones, you could tell that the enemy was somewhere on the right, which lets you deduce, if you couldn't see it, that it must be somewhere behind and to your right. But with 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out.
Interessante isso. A questão do áudio é o seguinte, hoje como é que é? Ele simula a posição do inimigo, como no Dead Space 3. Ele fica, se o inimigo está atrás de você, ele baixa o som do canal da direita para dar uma sensação de como se ele estivesse atrás. Segundo ele aqui, o áudio que o PlayStation 5 vai trazer é exatamente como se ele estivesse lá. Essa é a tecnologia, por isso que é Presence e Location, ou seja, presença e localização. Interessante isso.
Depending on the frequency of the sound. Head size and head shape also impact the sound in a similar fashion. The way that the sound changes based on direction and frequency can be encoded in a table called the
direção, frequência,
or
decibéis.
Here's part of one. The vertical axis is the frequency.
Muito interessante, porque agora muito bom.
Direction, front, back, left, right,
o som ele vai ser direcionado, ele não vai mais ter frequência apenas, ele vai trabalhar também em direcionamento. É uma tecnologia interessante, que é uma das coisas que os desenvolvedores queriam fazer em jogos, principalmente jogos aí de terror, esses jogos mais imersivos. Mostrando como é que ia funcionar as questões dos canais.
We then play an audio sweep from each speaker as we rotate the subject. In the course of 10 or 20 minutes, we're able to sample the HRTF at over 1,000 locations. Using an HRTF when rendering audio creates unparalleled quality, but it's computationally expensive. The simplest way to use an HRTF is to process a sound source to make it appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 locations we sample. Unfortunately, the processing has to be done in frequency domain rather than time domain, so there's multiple fast Fourier transforms needed for every sound source for every audio tick. That's a lot of multiplies. This computational complexity was the determining factor for our strategy. It meant we had to bite the bullet and design and build a custom hardware unit for 3D audio. Collectively, we're referring to the hardware unit and the proprietary algorithms we run on it as Tempest 3D Audio Tech. The meaning of 3D audio and technology should be pretty obvious here. As for Tempest, I feel it really reflects our goals with audio. It suggests a certain intensity of experience and also hints at your presence within it. We're calling the hardware unit that we built the Tempest engine. It's based on AMD's GPU technology. We modified a compute unit in such a way as to make it very close to the SPUs in PlayStation 3. Remember when I said that they were ideal for audio? So the Tempest engine has no caches, just like an SPU. All data access is via DMA, just like an SPU. Our target was that it would have more power than a CPU, thanks to the parallelism that a GPU can achieve, and that it would be more efficient than our GPU, thanks to the SPU-like architecture. The goal being to make possible near 100% utilization of the CU's vector units. Where we ended up is a unit with roughly the same SIMD power and bandwidth as all 8 Jaguar cores in the PlayStation 4 combined. If we were to use the same algorithms as PSVR, that's enough for something like 5,000 sound sources. But of course, we want to use more complex algorithms, and we don't need anything like that number of sounds. It would have been wonderful if a simpler strategy, such as using Dolby Atmos peripherals, could have achieved our goals, but we wanted 3D audio for all, not just those with licensed soundbars or the like. Also, we wanted many hundreds of sound sources, not just the 32 that Atmos supports. And finally, we wanted to be able to throw an overwhelming amount of processing power at the problem, and it wasn't clear what any peripheral might have inside of it. In fact, with the Tempest engine, we've even got enough power that we can allocate some to the games, to the extent that games want to make use of convolution reverb and other algorithms that are either computationally expensive or need high bandwidth. But the primary purpose of the Tempest engine remains 3D audio. Now, 3D audio is a major academic research topic. It's safe to say that no one in the world has all of the answers. And the set of algorithms that has to be invented, tuned, or implemented to realize our vision for 3D audio is immense. For example, use of HRTFs in games is quite complex. Before, I talked about making a sound source appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 HRTF sample locations. But for high-quality 3D game audio, we have to handle other possibilities. The sound source might not be at one of the 1,000 HRTF sample locations, so we have to blend the HRTF
Enquanto
data from
ele
the
vai falando
closest
bastante aí
locations
sobre a
that we
questão
have
do
sampled.
som, e
The sound
porque é uma
source might
coisa
be moving,
extremamente
which means
técnica, tem muita
very
coisa que eu não
special
consegui nem
handling as that
entender aqui,
blend
mas vamos
keeps
lá.
changing, and that can cause
O
phase
Bernardo Lima
artifacts in the
perguntou
resulting
aqui, ele
audio.
recomendou ali pela
Or the sound
desvalorização
source
e
might have a side
obsolescência,
to it, meaning
não
it
vale a pena
feels that
comprar o
it's coming
PlayStation
from an
4
area
agora,
rather
porque no
than
Brasil
a
por causa do
single
valor do dólar. E,
There's also whole categories of approaches
e ele
to be handled.
perguntou qual
3D
console que eu vou
audio can
adquirir
be implemented
primeiro,
using
qual que eu
individual
recomendaria
processing
comprar.
of 3D sound sources.
Eu
But
me organizei para
alternatively,
comprar
ambisonics
primeiro
can be used for
o
3D
Series
audio.
X.
Ambisonics
Espero
speaks
que não venha
somewhat
muito
like the
caro,
spherical
mas
harmonics
porque
used in computer
é uma
graphics.
preferência minha,
And
tá?
finally,
Eu
there's
prefiro
audio
mais e eu
devices.
tenho
The
certeza que eu
player
vou
might
poder
be using
municiar
headphones or
tanto a minha
TV
diversão
speakers
como
or
o canal
have a
aqui com
higher-end
jogos, por
surround
causa do
sound
Game
setup with
Pass,
6 or more
Ultimate Game
speakers,
Pass.
all of which need different
PlayStation
approaches.
5 eu vou comprar um pouco mais
That's a
além.
lot
Eu
of
fiz isso com
variations.
o One,
It's nice to have
fazer a
the
mesma coisa aí
computational resources of the Tempest
com
engine,
o,
but it's clear that achieving
com o
our ultimate
PlayStation 5,
goals with 3D
com
audio is
o
going to be a
Xbox Series X. Vai
multi-year,
ser o meu primeiro
step-by-step
console.
process. Having said that, headphone audio implementation is largely complete at this time. It was a natural place for us to start. With headphones, we control exactly what each ear hears, and therefore the algorithmic development and implementation are more straightforward. For TV speakers and stereo speakers, we're in the process of implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the
Então,
sound can be made to feel as if it's coming
no
from any
headset
direction,
você vai ter
even
toda a
behind you.
sensação. Lá na
Virtual
televisão ele
surround
vai
sound
fazer
has
o
a lot in
Virtual
common
Surround
with 3D
Sound, ou seja,
audio
por
on
isso que você
headphones,
vai
but
ter uma
it's
opção
more complex
provavelmente no
because
PlayStation 5
the
para
left ear
optar
can
por
hear
qual
the right
tipo de
speaker
som
and vice
que
versa.
você quer escutar o
We have
jogo.
a basic implementation of virtual surround sound up and running. We're now looking at increasing the size of that sweet spot, which is to say, making the area you need to be in to feel the 3D effect larger, and we're also working to boost the sense of locality. Headphone audio is the current gold standard for 3D audio on PlayStation 5, but we're going to see what we can do to bring virtual surround sound to a similar level, after which we'll start in on setups with more speakers, such as 6-channel surround sound.
Aí, naturalmente, se
It's
você
now to
tiver
the
um
point
home
where some of the
theater,
PlayStation
você
5
vai poder
games in
utilizar
development
ele,
are
porque ele vai funcionar
extensively
de
using
boas.
these systems.
Mas é bem
One of
provável
the
que
game
você vai ter
demos
que
allows you
optar
to
por
toggle
qual tipo
between
de áudio que você quer
conventional
escutar.
PlayStation 4 style stereo audio and our new
Acontece isso com
3D
alguns jogos
audio.
já, hoje
I
em dia.
listened with just an ordinary pair of over-the-ear headphones, and wow, I could feel a difference. 3D audio has that dimensional feel to it.
Ele disse que
Conventional
você
stereo
com
audio
o
feels
headset,
smashed
você
flat by
realmente
comparison.
é,
The improvement
sente a
is
diferença do som. O
obvious.
som é muito
So,
mais
a big
real.
advancement, but have I
consegue
entered
capturar
the
todos
matrix? Does my
essas
brain believe
sensações.
I'm really there? Like I was talking about earlier when I explained our target of presence. Well, the answer is no, but
Agora,
you've probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine, it was the default HRTF. The audio team analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt was the closest fit to the total game-playing audience. This shows a piece of the default HRTF on the left and my HRTF on the right. You can see that the general features are much the same, but the details are quite different. With the default HRTF, as I said, the 3D audio sounds pretty great. When I use my HRTF, though, the audio reaches a higher level
dá para
of
ver as
realism,
ondas ali,
which is to say
a diferença
that when
do
using
default
headphones and my
e do
HRTF,
CERN
I
HRTF.
occasionally get fooled
Como é
and
que as
even
ondas
think the
elas se
sound is coming
concentram
from the
mais
real
e dão uma
world when it's
dispersão
actually
a
coming
mais
from the
também
game.
na parte ali mais amarelada. É meio
Corollary to
complicado
this is that
demais
there are
explicar
few
isso aqui,
people whose
mas
HRTFs
o que dá para entender
sufficiently
realmente é
far
que
from the default
presença
HRTF.
e
That's
location,
the
presence
red
e
dot
location
here.
é para
But they
você
can toggle
realmente
between
sentir o
PS4
som
style and
como se
PS5
o
style audio
inimigo,
and
ou
not
seja lá o
sense
que
much
vier,
difference.
realmente
I've had
esteja sendo
a few
direcionado
people describe
daquela
the PlayStation
frequência,
5's 3D
naquele
audio as sounding like
naqueles
a bit
graus
better
ali,
stereo
para que você
audio.
tenha uma sensação muito
Presumably, they're the
melhor
ones
aí
at the
de
very
áudio.
edges of this diagram.
É uma
Which
boa
means
pergunta,
what
Bernardo. Será que
HRTF you're
som
using is
estéreo é
key.
melhor que o Dolby
I'd like
Atmos
everyone to
que
be
há
able
no
to
Xbox?
experience
É uma
what
boa
I'm
pergunta. Já o
experiencing,
Xbox
but
Series X
obviously
já
it's
tem o
not
Dolby
possible to
Atmos
measure the
e é
HRTF
simplesmente
of every
sensacional.
PlayStation user.
Agora, é uma
That means
tecnologia
HRTF
própria,
selection
pelo que eu
and
entendi aqui, a
synthesis are going to
Sony
be
mesmo
big
que está
topics
desenvolvendo
going
esse
forward as the
HRTF aqui.
Tempest
Então,
technology matures.
é uma
At
tecnologia
PlayStation 5 launch,
que a gente
we'll
vai
be
ter que
offering a
sentir para
choice of
saber se é
5
melhor ou não.
HRTFs. There's a simple test where you pick the one that gives you the best locality. That's just the first step, though. This is an open-ended research topic. Maybe you'll be sending us a photo of your ear, and we'll choose a neural network to pick the closest HRTF in our library. Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your head, and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize the HRTF. Maybe you'll play an audio game to tune your HRTF. We'll be subtly changing it as you play and home in on the HRTF that gives you the highest score, meaning that it matches you the best. This is a journey we'll all be taking together over the next few years. Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience that next level of realism. Hopefully, I've been able to illustrate a bit about our design and decision-making process today, and why
Felizmente eu
PlayStation 5
consegui
has the
ilustrar
feature
um
set
pouco
that
de
it
toda a
does.
arquitetura aí do
Now
PlayStation
comes the fun
5.
part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set. I'm hoping for the completely unexpected. Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the
Espero que
capabilities of
vocês
the
todos
SSD,
estejam
or
recebendo o que
something
vocês
else? I
esperavam.
guess we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for your time today.
Muito obrigado pelo seu tempo. Bem, o que deu para entender aqui, gurizada? Então vamos lá. Vamos só fazer uma coisinha aqui antes, para a gente poder aí debater o que foi dito aí nesse negócio aqui.
Ray tracing, the
Espero que
capabilities
vocês
of the
todos
SSD,
estejam
or
recebendo o que
something
vocês
else?
esperavam.
I
Olha,
guess
ficou
we'll
na
find
minha...
out soon.
acabou entrando aqui
Thank
no
you
meu
for your
próprio vídeo. Muito obrigado pelo seu tempo. Ok, vamos lá. Deixa eu só ligar aqui, dar um pause no meu próprio vídeo, senão vai ficar uma coisa meio, Deu pra entender aqui. meio estranha aqui. Bem, o que acontece, gurizada? Vamos bater uma fotinha aqui do que eu consegui anotar. Mas assim, memória de banda, que foi uma coisa que eu fiquei em dúvida ali, gurizada. Porque o que acontece? Ele só comentou sobre a questão de 5 GB por segundo. 5.5 GB por segundo. Deixa eu até botar aqui. GBS. GB por segundo. O armazenamento interno vai ser a mesma coisa, né? Pelo que, na realidade, ele não mencionou o armazenamento interno. Mas vamos lá, vamos dar uma conversada aqui sobre... Olha, ele explicou muitas questões de arquitetura que quem manja bastante deve estar... mesmo quem manja bastante deve estar em dúvida, porque são tecnologias novas, são tipos de processamento de GPU diferentes também. Então, não temos muito o que ainda... Deixa eu até colocar aqui para a gente poder entender juntos. Aqui, imagem e localizar, e aqui tá o Series X com o PlayStation 5. Então, importante, né? Faltou ali o processamento. O processador é praticamente o mesmo. A AMD com 8 cores, mesma coisa. A questão da GPU, mesma coisa também, porém, ele tem 10 teraflops. Só que a tecnologia que ele vai utilizar, compartilhando potência da CPU junto com o GPU, para trabalharem juntas, esse é o ponto chave, gurizada, que aí que não dá para ter muita certeza. Então, vai ser complicado aqui, né? Deixa eu ver aqui. Nada do design. Pois é, nada do design. Então, essa foto aqui ainda é uma arte conceitual. Não mostraram absolutamente nada. Então, vamos dar uma olhada aqui. Eu quero ver se a gente consegue também dar uma olhada no próprio PlayStation Blog. Porque eles não falaram nada de design. Não falaram também nada sobre o próprio... o preço, claro. O preço eu já imaginava que isso não ia acontecer agora. Mas... Faltou realmente, Bernardo. Faltou alguma coisa, a questão do design. Então isso aí realmente ficou um pouquinho em dúvida ali. Aqui já tem a transmissão do cara. Deixa eu ver uma coisa aqui. Vamos só dar uma tirada aqui nessa minha imagem. E vamos botar aqui o PlayStation de novo. Pra gente poder trocar uma ideia. Só vou pedir um minutinho. Só um minutinho. Beleza, tô de volta. Sabe como é que é, né? Com criança pequena em casa, tem que priorizar o atendimento dela sempre. Mas vamos lá. É, bem, eu achei que a informação ela foi extremamente técnica, foi para o público de desenvolvedores, para dizer para eles, olha, vocês vão ter um console onde vocês vão poder colocar os seus sonhos na tela, né? É, muito interessante esse ponto aí que ele comentou sobre o som, sobre essa tecnologia de trabalhar em GPU e CPU juntas, e também essa questão do áudio, essa questão do áudio não, essa questão da arquitetura
Hi.
do... Ó, deixa eu só baixar aqui
Unfortunately,
um
we
pouquinho o
had to
volume.
cancel the talk that we had
Baixar aqui um pouquinho o
planned for
volume, pra gente ficar comentando enquanto ele vai falando ali. A arquitetura do PlayStation 5 me pareceu, até para não ser injusto, muito semelhante ao do Xbox Series X, certo? Mas o ponto-chave aqui, gurizada, é a questão da GPU. A GPU trabalhando com 10 teraflops, só que compartilhando potência do GPU e da CPU. E isso aí que a gente vai ter que ver na prática, eu acho. Porque não dá pra chegar simplesmente e tirar uma conclusão dizendo qual é o mais poderoso em relação à CPU, a GPU e a CPU. Mas o console tem informações interessantes aí em relação ao áudio, a questão o CPU e memória, a mesma coisa. Tá? GDDR6, enfim, 16 GB, não muda nada. O grande ponto é GPU. Ah, e claro, eu acho, eu não consegui pegar isso, mas ele não informou a quantidade de memória interna do console. Ele não informou quanto que vai trabalhar com SSD, isso ele informou, mas eu não entendi ali ele informar sobre as questões ali de, 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 de armazenamento, né? Ficou muito confuso a parte ali do I/O, mas pelo que eu entendi, o I/O dele vai trabalhar entre 2.2 e 3.5, então tanto na compactação como na não compactação. A mesma coisa que o Xbox Series X, que vai trabalhar de 2.4 a 4.8 GB. Então, me parece que aí o Xbox Series X leva uma vantagem. Leva uma vantagem também lá na GPU, mas a gente não sabe como é que vai trabalhar em conjunto com a CPU. Não sei como é que isso vai funcionar. Me pareceu uma preocupação da Sony a questão de consumo de energia e aquecimento. Então, pode dar um indício de que eles estavam enfrentando problemas com isso, né? Que eles não estavam conseguindo. E o ponto-chave, retrocompatibilidade. Pelo que eu entendi, gurizada, é... Opa! Pelo que eu entendi, gurizada, eles estão com um problema de... Eles tiveram um problema que eles tiveram que retirar a retrocompatibilidade do PlayStation 3 e do PlayStation 2. Então... E aí vai ficar só o PlayStation 4. Ele botou o PlayStation 4 Pro, mas não tem jogo exclusivo PlayStation 4 Pro. É só o PlayStation 4 que vai ter a retrocompatibilidade, pelo que deu para entender. Mas beleza, a meta deles sobre a questão de desempenho lá em qualidade também parece que ficou muita mesma coisa ali em relação a 4K, 120 FPS, 60 FPS, enfim. Mas também não ficou muito claro. Mas assim, deixa eu digerir essas informações. Eu vou tentar preencher essa tabela aqui pra gente voltar a falar aí, porque ainda tem mais alguma informação que vai sair do Xbox Series X hoje às 17 horas. Eu não sei se eu vou conseguir acompanhar, vocês sabem que eu tô numa situação um pouco complicada aqui em casa, mas eu vou agradecer a vocês aí por terem acompanhado a transmissão. Deu pra tirar umas dúvidas aí, mas ainda tá muito muito misterioso, como o Bernardo ali disse. O design também tá tão misterioso que pode ser tão belo, tão horroroso. O Xbox Series X, os caras já abriram o console, já viram ele ali, é aquele ali, é aquela torre, né? Mas beleza, gurizada, espero que vocês tenham curtido aí. O Binho Santos disse que é Play Carroça. Não sei, cara, vamos ver. Não dá pra dizer nada ainda. Vamos esperar aí como é que vai ser aí. Ainda tem muita coisa misteriosa ainda, mas ele realmente deu uma ênfase aí pra questão do áudio, pra questão desse trabalho entre GPU e CPU em conjunto, a questão da retrocompatibilidade que perdeu aí PlayStation 3 e PlayStation 2. Vamos aguardar, vamos ver aí como é que vão se desenrolar aí as coisas. Até agora, pelo que eu estou vendo das especificações técnicas, o Xbox Series X leva vantagem ainda. Até agora. Mas vamos ver. Espero que vocês tenham curtido aí a transmissão. Sei que foi um pouco difícil aí pra mim, principalmente que eu tava com a minha pequena aqui do meu lado. Mas se vocês curtiram o vídeo, não esquece de deixar o joinha, compartilhe e comente o que vocês acharam aí. E amanhã, 11 horas, amanhã, meio-dia e 30, transmissão nossa aqui pra gente falar sobre a comparação entre os dois consoles. E vai dar muito choro isso ainda, vai dar muita polêmica, vai dar muita gente comentando, vai dar muito meme ainda. Mas vamos lá, que a ideia é trazer as notícias de forma prática aqui amanhã pra gente poder acompanhar o desenvolvimento e o andamento do lançamento desses consoles que vão ser lançados aí ambos no final do ano. O que me decepcionou foi o retrô do PlayStation 4. Também fiquei chateado. Ele falou que ia ficar muito caro botar chipsets lá dentro para poder fazer com que a retrocompatibilidade fosse nativa do console. Daqui a pouco eles vão resolver fazer uma retrocompatibilidade, né, meio parecida com o que tem no Xbox One hoje, que é baixar o jogo, mas não através de disco. Mas como é que vai funcionar comercialmente isso? Como é que eu vou provar que eu tenho aqui um jogo, não tô achando aqui, um jogo de PlayStation 2 aqui, como é que eu vou provar que eu tenho um jogo de PlayStation 2 e eu quero jogar no meu PlayStation 5? Então, me parece que a retrocompatibilidade vai ficar realmente só nativo no PlayStation 4. Beleza, gurizada? Voltamos aí com mais vídeos logo, logo. Obrigado mais uma vez. Muito obrigado por estarem acompanhando juntos. Valeu mesmo. E voltamos com mais vídeos logo, logo. Amanhã, meio-dia e 30, gurizada. Vídeos sobre comparação desses consoles e mais notícias do mundo dos videogames. E os comentários que vocês deixam aqui nos vídeos. Não se esqueçam de deixar seus comentários aqui pra gente comentar ou responder aqui no nosso Games da Galera News amanhã, meio-dia e 30. Valeu, gurizada!